Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm your host and head witch, Miss Solaris BlueRaven at the helm this evening. Want to give a shout out to everybody at Revolution Radio, staff, producers, listeners, chat room, and thank everyone for tuning in tonight. We are 100% listener supported, so if you like what you're hearing, please click on the donate button. We appreciate your support and thank you for any contribution you can make to this excellent station. And I hear Miles in the background. Happy Imbolc to my pagan and Wiccan brothers and sisters out there. Of course, this is a festival marking the beginning of spring, and it can't happen too soon over here in the Rockies. So we are listening to Studio A, and my special guest this evening, of course, is Miles Johnston. And Miles is a leading-edge investigator, researcher, and producer for his own production company called Underground Video UK from 1995 to present. He's also has his hands in a lot of different things, People's Voice and all sorts of good stuff. And I don't have a real formal bio for you, Miles, but we'll get down to it here. And the website is www.undergroundvideouk.com. And please welcome Miles to the show this evening. How you doing, Miles?
I'm in the background. Oh my God, where's that?
You're live.
Jeez, no, hold on. No, I'm in the background. Gosh, no, if I'm in the background, wow.
Good morning.
Yes. Good morning from sunny Wiltshire at 5 a.m.
Rub it in.
for Wiltshire, and we have had 200% rainfall this month.
Wow.
Of January, and it's weather engineered. It's completely artificially created, and I've done a little bit of an analysis on this, but it's difficult to describe to people that when you see long, linear, straight lines of cloud, that's obviously natural. And when you see them all bunched up, I actually now believe that what's happening here is, because there was a wonderful photograph on the front page of the Times. It's the Times, not the London Times, because there only is one Times. The London, oh God, don't be silly, Miles. But I think what's actually happening here is because I'm actually in the very, very center of crop circle country, okay? Mm-hmm. And crop circles are made by people, but when people make them, there are other beings looking at the guys who make them and studying them very carefully. Other indigenous life forms to this wonderful planet we live on watch the guys with planks and boards and whatever make those crop circles. And while I recorded an interview just only about a quarter of a mile away from here in this wonderful place called Honey Street, right in the middle of the most fantastic place. I mean, I have to put a shout out to the lovely Barbara Lamb, who lost her husband. She would stay in this wonderful B&B where this is a fantastic alpha class bed and breakfast. It's right beside a place called the Barge, which has all been refurbished. Mm-hmm. And while I recorded that interview with Busty Taylor, that doesn't mean he's got big boobs, okay? It means he's a pilot, and he was one of the veteran researchers. He's actually in his 70s now. But whilst he described to me about while he flew over the area, he'd get a little message in his mind, look down now. And he would look down and there would be a crop circle. And this is stuff from his perspective went back to the 1940s. So this is so very important that we have a living consciousness here, which is saying hello. Now, the other problem is that no bipedal, so-called intelligent being on this planet is indigenous to this planet. Mm-hmm. You and I, all of us, are not native to the earth.
Thank you.
Okay?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Now, the point about this is we have a predator. Okay? And that predator seeks to remove us from this earth in any physical form and all life on this planet. Okay? And what's happening is that a lot of the abductees and contactees and those who have engaged or been engaged by the secret military forces, because Revolution Radio folk must understand that for at least the entire 20th century, at least, I'm saying that, there has been secret military forces fighting to try and save us from literal oblivion. And that fight has now come to the stage where every single person on this planet of all races, creeds, and religions must now know the secrets that must never be told. Because if we do not collectively wake up, we will never enjoy this wonderful planet ever again. And for that reason, we also have a little thing called the black goo, which is now in a stage where, in order to protect future life on this planet, it may have to reset the mathematical relationship that our physical matter has with life on this beautiful sphere. Because if it does not do that, if we cannot stop this predator, the predator will then action through our DNA destruction of all our seed sources that we came from all across the universe. So this is not just about life on this planet, us, little old Western society, so to speak, in sort of collective terms. It's about everything, because a lot of the plant life and animal life is here, has a relationship with us, and because it has a relationship with us, they will also go. All right? Mm-hmm. So apart from that, Solaris, good morning, happy days. Isn't life wonderful?
Oh, I love you. I'm glad you're here. Yes, it is a good morning, and I hope you're enjoying your tea. And so far as the predator goes, now that you have my wheel spinning a little bit, what's your description of the predator? Where is its origin?
Well, basically, the predator is one of the beings which were brought here by something. Mm. Now, the thing about it is that one of the people that I've interviewed was a wonderful girl called Ava in Prague, and she is talking about being a higher dimensional being. I think in relative terms, in terms of physical matter, and in terms of the way that a soul is integrated into physical matter, we are, if I could try to give a relative perspective to most life in the universe, we are like in the very depths of the bottom of a very, very deep ocean, which means that the pressure on our physical bodies in relative terms is extremely high. Now that's not, it's because the time space fields that we exist in here are very, very dense time space fields. Mm-hmm. Which means that the physical molecular structure that we exist in, our bodies, our sort of physical makeup exists under an extremely complex, highly pressurized field, which means in relative terms, if we were to see aliens and things like that, we would see them as sort of a misty ghost type thing. That's why when you see when people see things, those sort of type of ETs, whatever it is, can sort of walk through walls, that kind of things like that. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't want to get too much into the detail, but it means that we are relatively unique in terms of the physical body and the soul being able to exist in such a highly dense bunch of molecules and atoms, mm-hmm. Which is why in the pyramids and all those other sorts of places like that, all the signatures which are in the standing stones, the ancient rocks, these wonderful the cairns, around here, Silbury Hill, all these other places indicate mathematics, which is an off-world perspective, and it's to use a Richard Hoagland term, a hyperdimensional aspect, and that's where a lot of the symbols in the crop circles, which are actually, a lot of them are copied from symbols in ancient churches and things like that. But the churches themselves were placed on rocks. I mean, for instance, a rock, a church refers to a kirk. In Old Irish, Cork, in the south of Ireland, Cork or whatever, that refers to the rock. And the rock refers to the stone, and the stones. And there's a magnificent woman here called Maria Wheatley who's been doing really wonderful research about it. And in the build-up, I was talking about Busty Taylor. The point is that when he talked to me about the real crop circles, the files that I recorded on the digital camera were reordered so that when I wanted to look at them again, I couldn't find them. Because the actual circle, the people who actually make the real crop circles were saying, hey, you're talking about us. We're going to let you know a little bit about something, about we're here, we're standing right with you. And it meant that I couldn't replay those files. So I thought they were lost. And this happened very similarly when I made a film about, a DVD about the 777 crop circle, which is a massive 1,000-foot long crop circle in the East Field, which is only a quarter of a mile away from where I am right now. And what happened there was a 1,000-foot by 500-foot wide crop circle made by people, and it was in one of the unusually large fields here. People in the United States got to understand that due to the very high density living conditions we have in England and Scotland and Wales and Ireland, the fields here really are quite small because they've been over generations often divided up and allocated to members of a family who've since split up and married, and so that the fields are really quite small here. But unusually in the Pewty Valley where we are now, we have very large fields, which is why you can have these large crop circles. But they're also on an aquifer of limestone and things like that. But the important thing is that man-made crop circle was made in its own little space-time bubble, because the military have been messing with the type of technology which allows you to create space-time little sub-bubbles. And when the circle makers finished their space-time, their crop circle, because what was happening was they're given the necessary time to make their crop circle in an isolated space-time or time-space zone, which means they can spend all the time they need to finish that crop circle. And one of the first examples of this was when Dr. Simeon Hine came to here a number of years ago, I think with Ron Russell, to make a crop circle so that they could study the effects of what these crop circles had on people and their consciousness. But they had a problem. In this part of the world, you only get about 4 hours of darkness maximum during the summer. And because we're so high, the latitude here in England is so high up that, we only have people only live here because of a thing called the Gulf Stream, which comes through the ocean from Mexico, from the Gulf of Mexico, and that gives us heat here, which gives us, a climate that we can live here. So the point is that you don't have very much time to make a crop circle at night without being seen. Okay? Now, the point about this is the guys in the crop circle, and I know Matthew Williams, and he's shall we say, a very mysterious character. He's a very good friend of mine. We've been doing research here for a long time into UFOs and bent waters and all sorts of things like that for a long time. But Matthew is certainly one of the people, and the longer you stay here, you realize that the whole crop circle thing is a very complicated affair, and there's various alphabet agencies involved with this. Now, the point about it is that my colleague Winston Keach had a lot of cameras watching this east field, and suddenly at about 3:10 in the morning, they hadn't seen anything, nothing untoward happening whatsoever from his external perspective. But suddenly there was a massive flash of light and a flash of energy, and it shut down all his cameras. So he then ran around with another couple of people, reset all those cameras and got them all going again. And then the sun started to come up. It was about 3:20 in the morning, and the first parts of the dawn was happening here, which is what I mean by how short the nights are. I mean, at this time of year, especially in July. And they could see this crop circle, and it was just unbelievable. Wow, it was so huge. And we went down to the crop circle, and it was ice cold and freezing. And but what had happened was the artificial time-space bubble had just rejoined our local space-time. And when that happened, there was a discharge of energy, and that's why you can use Geiger counters to detect when you've had a space-time disruption, because the molecular structure of the local matter will radiate energetic particles, which you can pick up as in a detector. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is in a long way of getting round is that it means that there is something with power to create space-time bubbles. Okay? Now, the important thing about this is the technology to do that is the same kind of technology they're using to create the artificial weather patterns which we're having right now in England, which is the most abnormal amount of rain that has happened ever since records began. Okay, so that's what the connection is here.
Wow.
And the point about this is that the signature from indigenous life on Earth, that's life that's indigenous energetically to the Earth, before the so-called gods brought humankind to this wonderful planet, is so concerned that the alarm bells are ringing in other dimensional existences of matter and life, that things are so serious that this fifth race, the so-called predator, which also found its way here, is so toxic to life that we must wake up now.
Agreed. Yeah, without a doubt. There's you can't deny that. I mean, the things that are happening across the globe right now, insofar as it feels to me like there's definitely a metamorphosis happening to the planet.
There is, and that's why my colleague Mary Rodwell, who's coming to this part of the world in the summer.
Nice.
We are planning a transhumanization conference here in Wiltshire in about the early part of August, and if I can collectively try to put a shout out to Professor Robert Duncan that we both mutually met at the Super Soldier Summit. It wasn't a conference, Miles, it was a summit last year when it was great to meet you.
And you too, by the way. I'll see you again.
Yeah, it was good fun, and I really would like to try and get him over here because his book Soul Catcher is so important. Because good old British Telecom has a project way back in the late 90s where they thought that if we injected every human being with nanobots and recorded every mental impulse that they ever made, we could store that on a big computer, and your kids could then experience everything you have. And they called that the Soul Catcher Project. Now, when you've got a national or telecoms company talking about capturing your soul, I think, and that's in the 1990s, that's available. You can see that on YouTube. It's British Telecom Soul Catcher, where you have the British online university called the Open University with bearded woolly type professors and scientists of the good old British tradition with leather things on their elbows and things like that, talking about soul catcher. We really need to sort of, excuse me, wake up very much, please. If you're dealing with scientists who are talking about capturing your soul.
Agreed.
I mean, this is what they're trying to do.
Oh yeah, tell me about it.
So essentially, that was an alarm bell that the indigenous life, the spiritual, wonderful life that lives on this world, is telling us through the fake crop circles, as these fakers. Now, some people might have a different spelling on that term. Make the crop circles. That even though they're faking it, there is intelligent life here saying, look what's going on, there's something really seriously wrong here. And Maria Wheatley, who's a fantastic woman, has done lots of measurements and found pulsating energies in the stones of Avebury. And these stones, these beings, these interdimensional beings, which are indigenous to this beautiful world, are desperately trying to communicate with us to say, look, wake up, human beings, because ultimately all souls will never be able to reincarnate into these wonderful bodies that we've got. A lot of people sort of discard, the body's only a mere casket, it's a mere container, it's not relevant, forget about it. Well, no, it isn't. It's a beautiful form of life which allows you to touch and feel and see and know so many wonderful things. And this enemy, this predator, is destroying us so that we can never properly reincarnate. And the signatures to that are all around us, which I don't want to really go into right now. But it means that all of us are extraterrestrial, and something or some being brought us here. And it seems now that the gods, so to speak, were themselves destroyed so they can never return and guide us. Because of this other set of intelligences which somehow got in here. For instance, if people look at the Bosnian pyramid, and there's a lot of controversy about is it a pyramid or a mountain or whatever, but what is in the Bosnian pyramids is lots of tunnels, and what it now appears is that those tunnels were filled in from the outside in, because the people who made that huge mountain or series of pyramid-shaped mounds in Europe were so terrified that something must not get access to the dimensional gate that was in that pyramid. And that pyramid's still pumping out, I think, a 32 kilo cycle, not kilohertz. Okay, that's very important. It's a alternating wave. It's a scalar wave. It's not a hertz. It's not a vector wave. And people must learn the important distinction between a radio frequency vector wave, energy wave, which is governed by the so-called constants of the speed of light, and scalar waves, because scalar waves are not governed by those laws which affect Hertzian waves. And that is where you get the technology to, for instance, control the weather, have gravitational space-time effects. And that's part of the technologies which are now being abused by the elite, because the elite think, we're in charge. So if you're dealing with the likes of the Illuminati and all those kinds of people who think they're, the Masonic order, all the various orders that you would know, they all think they're so damn clever, but they're not. They've been conned. You and I have been conned. Every single person has been conned or induced into a sickness. Some people call it religion, but and we're being conned and controlled every day when we watch television, because those radio and television stations have been constructed by the intelligence agencies and the people who govern everything, which is spying on every damn thing we do and think and make, which is one of the things that Dr. Robert Duncan was talking about. And also I'm referring to the starseedresistance.com release, Mind Control America Navy Disclosure Parts 1 and 2,
right,
that I sent you.
I looked at that briefly, yeah.
Yeah. Now, I was given that on the 15th of January as a release. And I have to caution very carefully that it, and I think Dr. Robert Duncan's work that he discussed at the conference that we were both at, the Super Soldier Summit, that I think could be a wish list of what they want to do. And what they want to do is detect and control every single thought that every form of life has on this planet. You know, from horses to dogs, everything. And the reason why they want to do that is they want to use those other life forms to spy on life forms or human beings that they haven't got access to.
Right.
In the same good old guise of good old witchcraft, where a witch would have a dog or a cat or a bird or something like that, and those other beings, those wonderful other indigenous lovely life forms, would be used to alert you to something that you can't notice for any reason particularly. So when the dog starts barking at an empty space in the side of the room, it's because there's something there. He can see it, the dog can see it, but you can't. And it's pay attention. And there's a wonderful woman here called a targeted individual who has uncovered a horrendous attack on the Earth's energy system, the actual pulse, the actual energy fields of the Earth itself in Richmond, in West London, Barnes, and that sort of location in West London. And myself and a very dear colleague of mine were walking through Richmond Park, and we noticed this is a beautiful park in London where you can ride your horses and things like that. And we noticed that the distortion of the trees are engaged in an appalling attack, an energetic attack on their life force. And that's because the appalling, the terrific, the unbelievably terrible, despicable acts being carried out on children here in these care homes, and the young teenage boys being grotesquely abused by the powers that be. I mean, literally, politicians and people who control corporations and things like that are abusing these children, but they're abusing them so that the terror and the hurt that they feel is then being fed into the Earth's energy system to attack Mother Nature itself, because the one thing that this predator cannot handle is the life force, the Earth, Mother Nature herself. So what they're doing is they're attacking Mother Nature. Now, what's happening in about 2 hours and 25 minutes is that Veronica Ford Keane and people all around the world, in China, India, and all places like that, are going to be engaging with a process to try and heal the Earth's energy system, grid system, the sort of ley lines. You know, the some people here would call it the St. Michael and Mary line and things like that. This is happening at 8 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time, and they're doing it at Glastonbury.
Nice.
Okay. Now, I am not going to sanction that. I am not entirely sure if the motives the declared motives of those people may be positive, but I'm not entirely sure whether their actual intent is to heal the earth, but actually to potentially to attack it. Now, I'm only saying that because I have to say things in a guarded fashion.
Right.
But literally on the 2nd of February at 8 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time, there will be a group of individuals at Glastonbury who are going to be with a whole series of people across the planet attempting to heal the Earth's actual life force. Now, whether they're actually going to do that or whether whatever process they're going to be doing in a couple of hours' time is going to actually have an effect, it should be an indication to the wider public that the living Earth, Mother Nature herself, is under attack from this predator.
Yes.
And that's why so many people, I was formerly involved with a project which was initiated by David Griffin and another guy called Dave Hodrian, called the Amash Project. And that was piggybacked onto and effectively taken ownership of by, on many levels, a very, very charming and very lovely a lovely woman called Joanne. Unfortunately, there are elements which seem to have sought to control her and which are off planet, which are extremely toxic to life. Now, we've heard of the reptilians and all sorts of other beings like that. They're in trouble as well. Make no mistake about this. The Greys, the other forms of ETs that we've heard of, are all in trouble from this problem as well, because the data about this was uncovered in the late 1950s by Russian intelligence services. Other intelligence services were seeking to engage that. I think the Mossad and the various intelligence services from the Hebrew-based Judaic societies were also engaged in trying to recover these data banks. And the point was, these data banks gave you access to technologies which you should never have access to, which is why we now need to know that we're all extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional beings which have been brought here by beings a long time ago. The first race to be brought here were the so-called white race, and they were brought here as very large beings. They hunted dinosaurs. That's how long the so-called white race has been here. Then a subsequent number of other races arrived, the so-called Chinese, the so-called Indian-type beings were all brought here. And they've all got in their indigenous cultures all stories about gods and extraterrestrials and things like that. And then we have what people would suggest is a pre-Christian culture, but I mean, the Christianity's merely a Roman Empire construct. I think people should understand very clearly that the Roman Empire is alive and well. And that's why so many of the laws that you have in the United States are actually based on Roman law. And then we've got various secret societies like the Masons and the Illuminati, who all feel that they're number one and there's nothing to worry about. And I think anybody must understand, you may be Illuminati, and I have had meetings with Illuminati, you modern, right here in your face right now, Illuminati, the true ones who know the secrets, who've been given the secrets. And that is why everything, all the stuff that David Icke talks about, I mean, the whole David Icke thing is a New World Order agenda. David Icke was launched by the BBC, by Terry Wogan, in that famous interview, because the BBC and that which controls the BBC is pure toxicity to all existence of life on the planet. And they have launched David, and I'm making a statement here because I've been in the People's Voice,
right,
and I was there to see it start. And there's a lot of really good well-intentioned people in that station in West London, and I've been involved in that. It was fantastic to be there when it launched, but people have been so misdirected with their intentions. So the point is that there's a major scandal happening here with the BBC in terms of a guy called Jimmy Savile, who was allowed to. He was positively vetted. He was a man who was checked out by all the relevant broadcast and high-level authorities as being suitable to be the face and front of British popular music in the 1960s, right through, for 40 years, in a television program called Top of the Pops. And Jimmy Savile was a guy who would help children with a lovely smile and all that. And that was called Jim Will Fix It. This guy, people should understand that you don't get into position like that unless you have been positively vetted. You've been checked out as suitable at the highest level. Because this guy had dinner with Margaret Thatcher. This guy is frequents and was very close to Prince Charles and British royalty. And it just so happens that the Savile family was sanctioned at the highest political level when Britain was invaded by the Norsemen, the Normans, 1,000 years ago, 1066. And that's how high this gets, that the invaders of the islands off the coast of Europe, known as Greater Brittany or Great Britain, the British Isles, where so many secrets are held. That's where civilization re-emerged after the Great Catastrophe. It re-emerged from Ireland, from the British Isles, the Great Britain, and also Egypt. And that's why there's a very strong connection between Ireland, not Ireland, but Ireland, though the land of the Aryans, those who hold the high secrets of life, not the blonde, blue-eyed people that was being corrupted by the propaganda involving the Nazis, but these are the people who survived after a huge disaster on Earth, and they tried to give us the higher knowledge. And what's happened is that's why there's always been this trouble in Ireland, because the Norsemen, the Romans, they came, they destroyed, they burned, they killed. St. Patrick massacred so many people in Ireland until they says, right, yeah, Christianity, yeah, is a good thing. But that whole thing is part of a matrix of a web by this predator, which is designed to destroy us in every way possible. And that's why these young children, which Mary Rodwell is doing such wonderful research on, and I know that Mary Rodwell is coming to England in the summer at the Glastonbury Symposium, and I do hope that she'll be able to talk at the Basis Project Transhumanization Conference in August.
Awesome.
Which so the point is that these young children, humanity is waking up, but they're being attacked with the education system and all these sort of people. So the point about the vetting situation is it means that the people who vetted Jimmy Savile and said he's absolutely correct, whilst he collected the children for mass child abuse through the authorities of the BBC and the broadcasters here, means that those people who vetted him are the predator. Okay? So I hope I've joined a few dots there.
Oh, absolutely, you have. I've been letting you talk because, my goodness, I wish we had 4 hours of you because it's phenomenal.
Oh my God, it's I haven't even had my piece of rose hip tea here, for Christ's sake.
I know, I woke you up, but I'm so glad to have you on. I will address 2 questions from the chat. I will be starting to take questions from the chat at the second hour, but let's go ahead.
Yeah. I'm sorry I've ranted on like that, but essentially, these secrets which we needed to know have now been spoken. And we've got to understand that all the races here are extraterrestrial. They were brought here by the gods who built the pyramids. They were massacred. They cannot return to Earth in physical form. So we have to join the dots ourselves. We have a predator. This idea that every animal on Earth eats something else, no matter what you are, something else is going to eat you. But humanity, nothing's going to do that to us. Well, I'm afraid, guys, we are going to literally be eaten. We will never reincarnate. We will never come back. The time space that this predator exists on is different to ours. So basically, a day in the life of a human being is like 100 years to them. In other words, they will last at least 1,000 years, which is what our original lifespan was, about 900 years. And some of the vestiges of that first arrival are the Sasquatch. They live about 900 years. They're big, tall, red. Well, I prefer to call myself strawberry blonde, quite frankly, Solaris.
Indeed, you are.
As opposed to ginger. He said it in Belfast accent, ginger. Do you understand that, ginger? We know where you live. That's one of the phrases that the paramilitaries uses in Belfast. Basically, Solaris, that you may run away like hell right now and feel safe in your home, but just to make you feel that little bit more secure, the guys who are going to break your legs and beat you up into a pulp simply say, we know where you live. Enough said.
Oh, yeah. Indeed.
So I was trying to add some levity there, as I mentioned that about Belfast terrorism. But the point about it is that Belfast, the people in Belfast were waking up, and a wonderful friend or legendary folk hero in Belfast called Terry Hooley has written a fantastic book called Hooligan. In the sort of that's Terry Hooley with a Terri, and the BBC has made a wonderful film of his life in the 1970s, where he was responsible for bringing through the punk music revolution. My Perfect Cousin by the Undertones is one of his great. He's a music producer, and he was on my pirate radio station as I pumped out the watts in Belfast with Belfast Pirate Radio, only about right beside the BBC. I used to switch on the transmitters, and he used to broadcast, and then I'd hightail it like hell, and I was forced to keep the revolution going, because I'm true revolution radio. The stuff you pick up on a damn radio, none of this computer crap. But if it wasn't for that, we couldn't be talking now. But I would sit in the BBC club in Belfast and be forced to suffer for the revolution by drinking 5 or 6 pints of Guinness so that I could be seen to be not involved with this pirate station in Belfast. So that's going back to the 1970s, which betrays my age. No, the 80s, the 70s, yeah. Anyway, and that's why I'm called Megawatts, because we pumped out 2 1.2 megawatt FM signals from the Irish border, and that was part of a sort of a matrix reclick or matrix fracture, and that was all good fun. But of course, anyway, I hope that says a few things. But it means that the culture in Ireland, a colleague of mine has done a great deal of work on this. The so-called religious divide in Ireland is there is a bipolar thought matrix construct to stop the Irish from realizing what they really are, or the so-called Irish, the Aryans, those who go back to the wonderful standing stones and how the mountains in Ireland were physically altered to create a signature on the Earth's surface, which indicates our source code is hyperdimensional. We come from the stars. Mm-hmm. All right?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm not going to shut up so people can ask.
You're so Aries. I just love you. We have a question from Cindy Lou. I'll address this question here. It says, Solaris, could you ask Mr. Johnston if the Alaskan magnometer spike on 9/11 had also to do with a space-time interdimensional event?
Yes. The point is that the 9/11 weapon system firing was that's one of the reasons why the various military agencies who have kept themselves totally behind the scenes until now, when they saw that space-time weapon, the weapon system, and it was a weapon system, wasn't that technology, we understand it was in these data banks which were recovered in the 1950s, and we believe the Germans may have recovered parts, some of those data banks in the 1930s. The Russians were in the Middle East, and they had got hold of some of these data banks. And this secret team of people, as they were going around the Middle East, bumping a few people off. And I know that John Lear was somewhere in there, wonderful John Lear. And I take my hat off to John Lear. John's a wee bit ill these days, and we all need to send him a good wish. He's a naughty boy, and he's good fun, but he recognizes some of these things which were done by this secret team. But the technology used at 9/11 fundamentally came from the data banks, which were uncovered and recovered by certain people. There are 6 of these data banks. They, I cannot say whether they're extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional, but they're data banks which contain visual information in a format which you can read with a device you can put on your hand. And these were uncovered. 2 of them were finally recovered. 2 of the 6 were recovered in the Middle East in 1959, and because there's a total of 6 of them, once you put all 6 together, they'd interlock together and go into a device, and that device was able to reactivate the gateways that the gods created, so to speak. I'm using very, very simple language to try and explain something very complex. Mm-hmm. But the pyramids, which were not built by the Egyptians, the Egyptians know that, and they don't bother researching them because they're not their technology. They were the devices which allowed us access out of safe passage out of the very complex and deadly convoluted space-time fields that surround this Earth. Make no mistake about it, we cannot leave this planet in a spaceship without our bodies disintegrating, and the Germans find that out. Mm-hmm. That's just why the Apollo landings off planet are a fake. You can send a machine out, but you can't send a living entity body unless you possess a form of technology which allows you to exist in a safe environment, which is very similar to the environment that we have on the Earth. Which means, folks, no Star Trek. You can't leave with your body, okay? If you do leave, your body will disintegrate, and your spiritual essence, your soul, will simply rejoin the others. The targeting philosophy of the Predator is to make sure that none of us ever have access to the physical domain, so we can never action anything ever again. And this technology which they've got access to, they've got parts of it, but they don't have the safeguards. They don't have all of it. And that's the important thing about that.
Yeah, well said. And there is another question here from Hilly Billy JP. Let's see, Miles, what's so special about Ireland and genetics, and are they from Atlantis? What about the Knights Templars and alien DNA lines?
Well, that's the point. Ireland. Now, it's not Ireland. I don't want to use the term. I mean, originally Ireland was called Scotia, after the daughter of one of the great pyramids. Not the pyramids,
And Miles, we're heading for a break real quick. We'll be right back. Everybody stay tuned. Ravenstar's Witching Hour. My special guest, Miles Johnston.
After the break.